In the steep hills of the Santa Clarita Valley, on the land of the Chiquita Canyon landfill, there is a cave called Bowers Cave, or Cave of the St. Martins. In 1884, two brothers found in it the greatest cache of artifacts of the Californian natives. According to one scholar, some of the most famous Indian material ever to be discovered in the United States, believed to have been placed by the Tataviam natives. The newspapers of the time came up with the story that they were stowed away in historic times by the medicine men of the tribe during the conversion of the natives to Christianity by the Spaniards, hiding them from being destroyed and preserving the symbols of their native faith. Some of the artifacts include 9 baskets, 15 complete and other 18 partial flicker and other feather bands, 45 bone whistles, various bull roarers, and 4 ritual or sun sticks, perforated stones mounted on 45cm or 18-inch wooden handles, which were likely used in the winter solstice ceremony, and other items. The artifacts were sold to Dr. Stephen Bowers, whose name was given to the cave. Part of the collection was sold to the Peabody Museum of Harvard University, where they still are to this day. The following is an article written in 1952 by the archaeologist Richard Van Valkenburgh on an expedition to search for Bowers Cave, whose location by that time had been lost, while also going deeper into how the cave was discovered. Tucked high in a ledge, slanting across a wind and water-scoured face of a desert ridge within sight of Castaic Junction in northwest Los Angeles County, California, is a cave from which came some of the most famous Indian material to ever be discovered in the United States. While archaeologists knew that the only mounted perforated stones ever to be discovered in the United States came from the region, they never had been able to locate the cave from whence they came. Their only clue was a statement by Dr. Stephen Bowers, the collector who handled the material, who said, "From a cave in the St. Martin Mountains in Los Angeles County. My first lead to the location of the cave came some years ago while I was engaged in archaeological work in Butte Canyon drainage. It happened while I was camped out on the old Ialik Indian Rancheria of Dawaquishpit, place of ball lightning. One evening, while looking over the arrow points, bone and wood artifacts, and basketry fragments which had been dug from a cave in nearby Hazel Canyon, William W. Lechler, who had lived in the canyon since the days of the Indians, casually remarked, 'This is pretty good stuff, but the greatest Indian find ever to be made around here was made many years ago by the Pile Boys. They got baskets as big as washtubs, feathered ropes and clubs made of wood and stone in the St. Martins. Everett Pyle is still alive and lives in Fillmore.' With this information, I immediately contacted Dr. John P. Harrington, ethnologist of the Smithsonian Institute. Together we went to Fillmore, and from Everett Pyle, then in his 80s, we heard the story of the Cave of the St. Martins. During the 1880s, Everett and his brother McCoy Pyle lived with their mother, Mandy Pyle, in Mud Springs Canyon, 3 miles northwest of present Castaic Junction. When out helping with the bees and livestock, the boys spent their time hunting through the nearby canyons and ridges. May 2nd, 1884, McCoy went westward over the old Indian Trail towards the St. Martins to look for deer. Picking his way upward along the sandstone scarps, he went over the apex of the ridge and started down south slope. 50 feet below the summit, he spied a black opening in a nearby ledge. Working across, the crumbly-faced McCoy reached the lip of the cave. Hoisting himself inside, he looked into the shadows. Before him, partially covered with dust, lay many Indian baskets ranging from small asphalt-covered water jugs to giants 3 feet in diameter. McCoy looked into the baskets. He saw feather robes and headdresses cunningly woven with flicker and condor feathers. There were also 4 finely chopped stone axe heads and assorted ceremonial obsidian knife blades and some crystals. But most importantly of all were 4 ceremonial wands or scepters. Shaped like donuts, these perforated stones were decorated with red ochre designs and were mounted on their original wooden handles with asphaltum, the waterproofing and glue of Southern California's primitive Indians. McCoy hurried back to the ranch and broke the news to Everett. They rounded up a couple donkeys and returned to the San Martins. After several trips to the cave, the boys finally had all of the treasure safely stored in the milk house at the ranch. It happened that Stephen Bowers was in the region looking for Indian relics. Hearing of the Pyle discovery, he hurried over to Mud Springs Canyon. He purchased the collection for $1,500. Everett reminisced, "That seemed like all the money in the world. It was like finding a gold mine." Bowers sold part of the collection, including the ceremonial wands, to Professor F.W. Putnam of the Peabody Museum, Harvard University. What happened to the rest of the material is not known. Bowers sold any artifacts to museums all over the world. Upon examining the material, Henry W. Henshaw of the Smithsonian Institute wrote, "While perforated stones have been rather commonly found in Southern California, these are the only ones ever found in the United States mounted on their original handles. After careful consideration of these implements, I am convinced that their peculiarities accord best with the idea that they were in the property of medicine men, or conjurers, and were probably used in dances, superstitious ceremonies, such as rainmaking, curing the sick, etc. Bidding Everett goodbye, John and I headed for the St. Martins. From Castaic Junction, we traveled southwest down to the Santa Clara River over Highway 126. Then we turned north and started up a small canyon, which Everett called the Cove. 1 mile's twisting drive on the dirt road brought us to the base of a ragged ridge. Looking up, we estimated that the summit was 1,000 feet above. After checking the landmarks given to us by Everett, we were sure that we had located the elusive St. Martins. Scanning the area below the eastern pitch of the ridge, we soon located the wild cherry tree that had been given us as a marker. Slipping on our haversacks and canteens, we broke through the heavy growth of the sage and started to climb the ridge. We found the base of the St. Martins to be composed of a conglomerate predominantly of fossilized oyster and pecten shell. We soon learned that this tricky formation, which may be wonderful country for rockhounds, made tough climbing. At the end of a 30-minute climb, we reached a level space 75 feet below the summit. We took our bearings. The lone wild cherry was a stone's throw across a ravine. Then we got the right angle. Under a ledge to the left of the tree, the cave of the St. Martins opened in the chrome-colored sandstone like a distorted mouth. Detouring the dangerous traverse direct to the cave, we climbed to the summit. From there, the whole country spread out before us. To the west, the peaks of the San Cayetano poked up through the clouds drifting in from the sea. Beyond lay the Padres National Forest, the habitat of California's giant condors. In the land of the long-gone Beniyum Indians, the headings of the Rio Santa Clara fingered up through the Bouquet, Mint, and Soledad canyons. Above, the heat waves shimmered upward from the desert to fade into the blue-black dome of the Sierra Pelona. After a few moments' rest, we started our descent to the cave. Finding foot and handholds on occasional clumps of sage, we braked our downward momentum until we reached the mouth of the cavern. When we jumped over the lip, we saw that it was not a large cave. The mouth was 21 feet across. The dome was 10 feet from the floor, and it ran back into the conglomerate 16 feet. A glance at a fire-blackened ceiling told us that the cave had known human habitation. Suddenly, John called out, "Van, Everett sure gave us the right dope. There's no question that this is the cave where McCoy made his discovery. There are some inscriptions here carved in the sandstone, and among them is MAC 1884. At the same time, my toe caught on something just below the powdery surface of the floor. Looking down, I saw that it was a large fragment of asphalt-coated basketry. Then I remembered what Everett had said. We left a big basket in the cave because it was crumbled. The discovery told us that we might learn more if we probed into the floor fill. Starting at the front, we worked back with trowels and brushes. When we finished, we knew a lot more about the Indians who had left their treasures there over 100 years before. Small blue and rose-colored glass beads found just below the surface told us that the cache found by McCoy had been placed in the cave around 1800 AD. The lack of hearths told us that this cave had not been used for permanent living, but as a hideaway. 3 pottery shards of black decoration on gray were turned up on the lower levels, sharply contrasting with the local Mojave Desert red and gray plainwares. These shards were later identified by the School of American Research in Santa Fe, New Mexico. They were very black on gray of the 13th century, coupled with the pile discovered of diorite stone axes, one of which was still in the possession of Everett. It seemed that the Eali clique had trade contacts that reached eastward beyond the Colorado River. Probably they traded seashells from the nearby coast for the worked stone and pottery of Arizona. When John and I finished our work, we rested on the lip of the cave and watched the casual shifting of the summer sunlight into the misty blue of the twilight. As I looked into the deepening gray shadow that was the Rio Santa Clara, my thoughts drifted back over 100 years to the pageant of what had happened passed before me.